Hello, and welcome to the non-dual lectionary for the 12th Sunday after Pentecost in year C. We've got I think, a pretty straightforward gospel lesson for this week, but with some different takes on it, I think that we can see, all of which are helpful. So let's jump right into it. We are looking at still book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 1 and 7 through 14. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. So, I mean, just on first glance, again, taking that perspective that we're taking with all of these lessons, I think there's a straightforward kind of teaching here, right? It's almost a practice. Um, there's also, I think, evoking something, and then I also think there's hmm, something like a background, um, like a preparatory kind of thing, or a community social talk discussion here. But let's start the practice first of all, right? Um, I think the practice straight away here is pretty straightforward, right? About our instinct to elevate ourselves, to try to look good, all of that, right? Um, and I think there's a practice here, right? Just a straightforward practice of, hey, don't do that. Because when you play the game of trying to look good, right? Trying to be successful, trying to achieve, whether you want to call it greed or esteem or power or importance, anything like that. Two things, right? One, it directly gets in the way of um, of that non-dual, that realization that's beyond all of that, right? Because as long as you're playing that game, there's an unending game there. It just goes on forever. There's never, we can often tell ourselves that story, right? Or the ego self, the psychological self tells itself that story, right? If I just have this one more thing, if I'm just more important, if I'm the best, then I will be comfortable, happy, satisfied, and it never ends. There can be something right about working that out, like having to try it and fail. But Jesus is just saying directly, right? Like, hey, if you can hear this, like, don't do that. If you can hear that, if you need to work it out, I mean, he's not saying this here, but if you need to work it out on your own, hey, sometimes that's what we got to do. There's all sorts of things that, for whatever reason, we just got to work out on our own. But, if you can hear this, this is, if you have ears here, right? Um, hey, don't play that game. Just get off the game. Um, because, you know, I mean, can that fundamental recognition of our true nature happen while we're playing that game? Of course. I mean, because nothing is right. If non-dual means anything, then nothing is separate from it. At the same time, it can get in the way, right? Um, it can kind of make it more difficult. So that just a straightforward practice here, right? Like, hey, um, if especially the second one, right? Um, not trying to look good, not trying to get repaid, not trying to build esteem, right? So yeah, I mean, I think a straightforward thing there, and I'm gonna take off the share because now we're gonna riff for a while on the rest. So then the second thing, right? And I think it's related is the evoking of something that's already true, right? So speaking to that part of us, the part that is what is, that's true from before anything that we decide is true or see that's true or recognize as true even. And that's why recognition is such a good word, right? But um you know that the exalted will be humbled, the humbled will be exalted, that invite everyone. Like the part that already recognizes that all these distinctions we make of what's good and bad and better and worse and important and not important and special and not special. There's a fundamental um, lie to that, right? There's something fundamentally unstable about that. I'd put it that way, even better, right? Like that does not last. And so a teaching like this, not only is it talking about like, hey, here's a thing to do, right? To kind of better prepare as you step along this path, right? But second, hey, I'm directly talking to that part that already recognizes that, right? So if so maybe that part steps up and goes, oh yeah, I recognize that too, and can evoke true nature right there. And then the third thing that I want to talk about a little bit is something we haven't talked about so much, or I haven't talked about so much in this series, right? Which is um, a lot of what I've been getting at is again Jesus's model, Jesus's teacher, um, and teacher both in like practice or in evoking something, or show living out like what it means to manifest that realization in the world. But there's another thing I think that gets talked about, especially in some of the Eastern traditions, of something like when like what like the first we're talking kind of about direct teachings a lot when we're talking about like non-dual. We're talking about that non-dual realization, right? Like just kind of an on-off switch, all or nothing. And it can give the impression like that's all that matters, right? And in a sense, it does. But there's another thing, like the initial training in a lot of traditions, right, is like all these tenets of ethics and basic like practices of like taking care of what needs to be taken care of and caring for people that need to be cared of and having a strict moral code. And that can seem sometimes outdated and all that. But also, the non-dual recognition, the realization that can come of our true nature doesn't necessarily require a moral code. Because if all you do is realize like, awaken to like the fundamental, hmm, well, yeah, I mean that fundamental like oneness, not separateness, like no better, no worse, and stop there, right? Um, and don't have any kind of that preparatory training, you can be kind of a jerk. And all you got to do is look around and see these teachers in the world, right, who have kind of lived that out and done some pretty big harm to people because they're just living out their own stuff, um, while living out while being authentically in a sense realized to the awakened nature and can even evoke it to other people. So part of what I think we can talk about here is like setting the social and moral order that will both best support that realization. That's like the first teaching, right? That like evokes that realization at the same time, but also like sets the like stable groundwork or like good soil for if you do wake up with that teaching, if you do realize your non-dual nature and then live that out, it has as a basis not just, well, now I'll do whatever I want, but as a basis of like, oh, this moral code is part of like what I do. And so, um, Jesus is a non-dually recognizing his true nature, right? Living out that non-dual nature in the world is doing like I think all three in just this little story here, right? He's both like giving a teaching that can set the stage for a personal realization. He's giving a teaching that sets like the stage for a stronger social and ethical communal bond for people to wake up in and also to live out that awakened nature after, and also like speaking directly to that awakened nature. And so it's pretty exciting, right? And all that little, like that little story, we can see all of that. Um, and it's speaking to like um to both like, hey, setting the groundwork for um the conditions, like the ripest conditions possible, right? To wake up, to live out that waking up, and then also just to speak directly to like, hey, look, this is what is already, and if you can hear it now, if you have eyes to hear, wake up now.